Psalm 2 tonight and see what Andrew's going to unpack for us. So looking forward to that. And I'm going to ask Charlene to lead us in a word of prayer, please.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm really, really excited to the Psalms and the thinking switch on and really, really, really good. God is thank you very much to learn and inspiration and aspire and like, isn't it awesome to pray, or awesome to listen, and the rain and the storm and everything, God. Everything works and it's amazing, and Jesus died and thank you very much to listen the Bible and really good. Thank you very much, and really good to listen. Thank you very much, and amen.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you, Charlene. So over to you, Andrew.
Okie doke. Thank you. Thanks, Charlene. It's like hearing Charlene pray is like listening to us, I reckon. It was wonderful. Thank you. So tonight, welcome everybody. And tonight we're in Psalm 3, actually. But just a reminder on how we're going about it for the next little while is that we're going to talk about something at the beginning to learn something new about the Psalms as a genre, and then we'll look at a particular psalm, a chosen psalm for the week, and then we'll see how it gets used in the Bible, if it gets used in other places and other ideas come out of it, that kind of thing, and then we'll talk about how its words affect you. So we'll learn a little bit about the genre, we'll read the psalm, but then as importantly, how do we engage with the psalm, individually and personally. So that's something that would be great to chat about. What we've already covered is that there's these different kinds of psalms, such as praise and thanksgiving, lament, royal, wisdom psalms, and we talked about really reading them as poetry, not as precision doctrine statements or anything like that. And so we expect to see lots of sort of poetic devices going on. There'll be exaggeration, this kind of thing, all the things we expect in poetry. And we talked about the Psalms being meditative literature. So that has a particular purpose in terms of our spiritual lives, and it's designed to be used in a meditative way, and people expressing their thoughts to God more than things coming from God back to us. So that's what we sort of talked about last time. As a recap, we'll add to that list. So tonight, as we get started, I'm going to talk about a little bit about parallelism. And what parallelism is a way of it's a really strong feature of Hebrew poetry, because if you think about a poem that we would be normally used to from our own culture, what sort of things, when you hear something, how do you know it's poetry? What sort of things are you listening for in a poem that you might have learned at school or might just read? Now, what do we normally expect in poetry that we're used to? Rhyme, exactly. Yeah. So one of the first things we do is, or as a child will learn poetry, they're looking to work out how to rhyme words so that each line ends with a similar sound. Okay. What else? Meter comes into it, so there's often a rhythm, you know, da 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 da. You know, there's a sort of a recognizable rhythm, and those things are features of, you know, Western style poetry. But the big feature in Hebrew poetry is this parallelism, and it doesn't use rhyme, it doesn't use meter like we're familiar with. But it uses this parallelism. And there's a number of different kinds of parallelism depending which list that you read. And we'll just sort of touch on a few of them. Okay, so there's one called synonymous parallelism. And what that is that if you imagine two lines in a psalm, and the second line repeats or restates the idea in the first line, but uses different words. It's talking about the same concept, but just two ways of saying the same thing. So here's an example. Psalm 24 says, "The earth is the Lord's and all it contains, the world and those who dwell in it." So the first line, the earth is the Lord. So in the second line, we don't use the word earth, we're using the word the world. Similar idea, different word. And all it contains is in the first line. And what is contained in the earth? Well, everybody who lives there. And so those who dwell in it. So really the earth is the Lord with all the people, and the second one, the world is the Lord's with all the people. So that's an example of synonymous parallelism. It's two lines are saying the same thing. Okay, that's the first kind. Another one, Psalm 3. "O Lord, how my adversaries have increased. Many are rising up against me." Who are the people that rise up against me? My adversaries. And what's happened to them? They've become a big number. They've increased, or we've got many. Similar idea. So that's an example of synonymous parallelism. Second kind is a big word, antithetical parallelism. Any guesses what that one might be? Again, we're talking about two lines.
The opposites?
The opposite, yeah, basically. So the second line is a contrast with the first line. And so it's highlighting a difference or an opposition. So here's an example. Psalm 37. "Better is the little that the righteous has than the abundance of many wicked." So the first line has got the righteous have a little, and the second line is the opposite of that. The wicked is the opposite of righteous, and having an abundance is the opposite of having a little. "For the arms of the wicked shall be broken, but the Lord upholds the righteous." So bad stuff's going to happen to the wicked. God is going to uphold the righteous. It's an opposite idea. So that's an example of antithetical parallelism. Then the third kind, this is the third main kind, is it's called synthetic. And what that is that the second line basically completes the idea of the first line. So the second line expands or elaborates on the thought expressed in the first line, providing more details or context. So Psalm 23, "Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me." So it's the same scene, but it's building on top of so you can imagine yourself walking through this dark valley, you know, could be really scary, but I feel no evil. Continue in that thought. Why do I feel no evil? Why do I fear no evil? Because I know that God is with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. So it's sort of filling out the idea of the first line. So that's what's called synthetic parallelism. And then one last one is what's known as stair-step parallelism. What do you think that might be? What's the name suggest? So if you go up a flight of stairs, what's happening? You're going up
to the top.
But it's going up a step.
Each line building on the next.
Each line, yeah, building on the next. We go here, and then we go from there.
The previous one, yeah.
To the next one, then to the next one. And so here's maybe one example. So it's progressing. So we are going up to the top. Yep, we are going up to the top. We're progressing the thought by repeating part of the previous line, but then adding on, and then we repeat that previous line, then add on to that. So that's the idea. So here's an example in Psalm 29, and the English part says, "Ascribe to the Lord, you heavenly beings. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Ascribe to the Lord the glory due his name. Worship the Lord." And you can see in the Hebrew there, it's the exact same two words in orange there. So you can see the shape, and so it's used the same words, and they translate it as exactly the same words as well. So that's an example. Ascribe to the Lord. A, ascribe to the Lord. B, ascribe to the Lord. C, going up a little stair. But that's just a little bit on parallelism, and that's a feature of the poetry, and you'll notice that we actually already came across it last week, didn't we? Blessed is he who remembers, does not stand in the seat of.
There's something of the wicked standing.
Yeah, does not. It starts on sitting. Does not sit in the seat of the wicked, nor stand in the way of the
righteous,
ungodly, or walk in the way of somebody else. Yeah, so it's the same idea. In fact, there's like three in that one. All right, so tonight we're in Psalm number 2, and it is a royal psalm. So remember, we talked about the different kinds of psalms. So the first one was really like a wisdom psalm, and Psalm 2 is a royal psalm because it talks about kings. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll go ahead and read the psalm here together, and you might want to follow along if you've got a Bible handy as well, so you can sort of refer back to it. But let's read it here. So what we're going to do is we're going to read the psalm together, then we're going to just focus on the images. So be looking and how does it strike you? How do you find yourself? What do you find yourself thinking as we get to the end of the psalm? What do you find yourself feeling as we get to the end of the psalm? See if you can sort of pay attention to that, and then and notice your own response to these words, because part of it is the way the psalms work, I believe, is that it does create a response for us, and we might have to walk through that a bit. All right, and then we'll have a chat about all of that. Okay. Okay, let's read the psalm. Why did the rebel and the people plot in vain? The kings of the earth take their stand, and the rulers conspire together against the Lord and his anointed one. Let us tear off their chains and free ourselves from their restraints. The one enthroned in heaven laughs. The Lord ridicules them. Then he speaks to them in his anger and terrifies them in his wrath. I've consecrated my king on Zion, my holy mountain. I will declare the Lord's decree. He said to me, "You are my son. Today I've become your father. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your inheritance, and the ends of the earth your possession. You will break them with a rod of iron you will shatter them like pottery. So now, kings, be wise. Receive instruction, you judges of the earth. Serve the Lord with reverential awe and rejoice with trembling. Pay homage to the Son, or he will be angry, and you will perish in your rebellion. So that's the end of the psalm. Sorry, for his anger may ignite at any moment. All those who take refuge in him are happy. So I went on for another verse there. So that's the end of our psalm, just 12 verses. Now, as you hear that and read that, what's first reactions? What stood out to you as you read the psalm? And is there any imagery that you're noticing in there? And yeah, it doesn't seem a bit dark, maybe. Yeah, interested in what does everybody think?
There's the open rebellion of the people against God.
Okay, we're seeing, there's a rebelliousness that's very front and center, isn't it? And being dealt with, yeah. Thanks. Anybody else?
So in verse 3, where it says, "Let us break their chains and throw off their shackles," it's basically like saying that that freedom, because that meaning that we're chained and shackled to God, but they want us, they're saying let them break. They want us to, those that aren't with God want us to break free of those for freedom, but it's the other way around. So the freedom comes when we are shackled and in chains to God.
So okay, that's so that's the rebellion as well. But then how do you handle that, and how do you see, maybe, so you're saying, do you see the constraints God might have as being actually what you need for freedom, or you just want to throw all of that off? So okay, all right, very good. Anybody else? Just ideas here.
I felt a sense of security about it.
You did? Okay.
You know where you stand. And and I also got the when it said I'm taking out of context, however, when it said, well, where is it about? He said to me, "You are my son, today I have become your father."
Yeah.
I really felt as if God was talking straight to me, and it was very warm.
Okay. Okay. So so that you felt that spoke directly to you. That's great. Yep.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rhonda. Yep.
The last verse is interesting, where it seems like God gets angry, can flare up in a moment, and yet other verses say that the Lord is slow to anger.
Okay, that's an interesting verse. And we'll actually spend a bit of time in that verse at the end, because I think it's kind of the key to the whole thing, actually. So, all right. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? How just 12 verses, how the different things that people notice, right? And that's why I think it's so great that we can do this together like this.
Sorry, Andrew, is this David writing this?
It doesn't say.
Okay.
Yeah, this one doesn't
Yeah.
say. Yeah. So we don't know. Yeah. Some of them they do say it's a Psalm of David or a Psalm of Solomon or a Psalm of Korah or somebody like that, but this one doesn't have any thing like that on the front of it. Did anybody feel that it felt a bit dark?
Yeah, I was going to say.
We had such a great time last week, and now look what we got. Yeah, James.
Andrew, I was going to say, yeah, you had that question. Does it seem a bit dark to you? But really, it's to me, God is showing mercy. He's giving these kings warnings, you rulers.
Yeah.
Do the right thing, and you'll be okay.
And
but
you'll
if
be okay.
you cross me, So in a way, it's because God is enthroned in heaven, as it says. He is the ruler. He can do as he pleases, and he's just telling these people, please me, and it'll go well with you.
Yep.
That's what I meant about a sense of security. It gives boundaries.
Yes.
If you remain in those boundaries,
yeah,
you'll be fine.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good way of looking at that. Yes, and it's not that hard, is it? It's well, it is hard, but it's and there's something in us, isn't there, that as soon as there's a boundary, though, what happens? To the human spirit.
Yeah.
That boundary.
We want to break it, and that's kind of that's actually the issue. I was actually looking at something around the Ten Commandments just this morning, as a matter of fact, and looking at how the Ten Commandments fits into the story of the Bible, and really, it really hit me that it's kind of an answer to everything that went wrong in Genesis. Is that Cain gets envious of Abel, or competitive with Abel, and where did that come from? Well, Adam and Eve wanted to be like God. They didn't quite obey, and then you can just see this multiplying factor, and then what the Ten Commandments is trying to do there, at least the last half of them, is like, so we've got to, in order for us to have a workable society here, you need these guys. Well, don't kill each other. Don't take everybody else's stuff. Don't lie about each other. And then I realized, well, from that's fine. That's the guardrails. But how do you get the heart to want to do that? And that's kind of the first half of the Ten Commandments talks about that, I think. So there's this idea of having these boundaries can be security, provided we don't want to rebel against that. So that's really good observations there. All right, so here's the psalm. So I meant to put this on up here so I could see it. Anything else, just as you can see the whole thing?
For me, I see a very clear contrast between how kind of impervious God is. He's sovereign. He's safe. He's secure. He mocks what's going on, and yet he will respond eventually. And, he is being merciful. Just that contrast between the evil and the good and righteous.
Yeah, and there is a patience. You're right, and okay, that's good. I think so. That's good. Well, I think we've got a bit of mind around how the psalm is working. So let's have a look as well. What is the psalm about? And is there a storyline? Was the question I ask myself. And in this particular case, I think there is a sort of a storyline weaving through it, and it goes something like this. So it starts off with, why have we got all this? Why have we got all this rebellion? Why have we got all this tumult? What's going on? We've got nations rebelling. We've got kings conspiring against God and against his anointed Messiah. Why is that happening? And that's the question the psalmist is asking us. And how does God respond to that? He just laughs. Really? You're worried about that? And then he just laughs at them. And his answer terrifies them. He says, my king is ready to go. You know, I've given him all of the nations. He will shatter them easily. Do you know who you're messing with? is the sort of the unstated part there. And so this is God versus the nations and the little kings on earth, you know, trying to rebel and shake off. And God is helping us to see, the psalmist wants us to see that God is so much more powerful than these kings, which are all around. And because originally written, let's not forget, originally written to, you know, the people of Israel, who were actually pretty vulnerable in terms of local geopolitics in the day. They were not a big country, really, compared to, say, you know, Assyria or Babylon or those kinds of places. So Kings, Psalm goes on, says, be wise about this. Don't rebel, learn, serve, pay homage, or you will perish in your rebellion. Feel his anger or take refuge and be blessed. Your choice. So that's kind of just my paraphrase of the passage. But I find that kind of thing helps me, is to figure out what, if there is a story, if I can understand the story, understand the line of thinking, the line of thought, that helps sort of unpack it for me. So that might be a thing you can use as well, and just writing down that just really helped me get my mind around the psalm a bit more. Yeah, does that square away with what you're picking up from the psalm?
That's good.
Okay. All right, let's move on. So how is the story told? So, and this is one of the first things I think Ray noticed, it. It's the language of kings going to war against kings. It's plots, conspiracies, taking possession, shattering, rods of iron. These are kind of all war type of war language, isn't it? War imagery going on, and probably underneath it all, the real question is, who's the strongest king here?
Jesus.
Okay. But of course, the kings of the earth didn't think that.
No.
Who did they think the strongest king was? Them. Sometimes who do we think the strongest king is?
Yeah.
Me. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of the age-old battle, isn't it? So who is the strongest king here?
Yeah.
And how should we respond to that? All right. And so then there's a follow-on question from who is the strongest king. The second question, part two of the question, is, and will we submit to his kingship or not? So that's what's happening, I think.
Andrew, can I just pop in there?
Please, Ray.
I think depending on your life's experiences, and whether you've had a difficult life or not, the strongest king you can think are people in authority. It can be, yeah. You could have a very low self-esteem and struggle for a long time to actually believe that God is stronger than the world. And especially what's going on at the moment, you can think, well, where is God? So I think that's another perspective.
Yeah. And I think that they're great questions, Ray, too. And I think there's something at the end of this psalm which helps us with that, which is a little bit of a twist. But I think I was thinking about this in the last couple of days, actually. because we're sort of, there's talk of war, right? There's a lot of this stuff sort of going on in the world.
Yeah.
War is pretty constant, but in and Ray's just experienced, at least what would you call it? Uprising, right, in New Caledonia. But I was talking to my wife about this. All my lifetime, we've been part of the post-World War II peace.
Yes.
And now you're sort of starting to see it. Maybe is it going to fray? What's going to happen? We don't know. And so there's an unease because we've enjoyed it. Basically, we've enjoyed it living here in Australia and in England. For the most part, it's been very, very stable for 70 years. But of course, there's places in the world that are constantly at war and under threat. And so we're not used to that. So, it is. It's been good for us, but we start to feel a bit uneasy about when things seem to be a bit less stable than they used to be. All right, I just want to throw in a little historical context here because I think that helps with these psalms. So we're talking about a king, and certainly when it was written, who is it talking about? Well, and who was the king, the reigning king on Zion? So Zion's that's
David?
Probably David or maybe Solomon, probably one of those. Yep, one of those two. So Zion is just another word for Jerusalem, really. It's like saying, it's just another word for Mount Zion. And because it talks about a king, and we'll talk about the New Testament sort of links to that king that we can see. But when it was written, they would have been thinking about, God's anointed king in Jerusalem at that time. That's what they would have been thinking about. And then the other thing, and this is a little quote from a book I'm using from a fellow called Robert Alter. He makes this point. He says, Zion is a modest mountain on the crest of which sits a modest fortified town, the capital of a rather small kingdom, surrounded by vast empires. Yet the poet boldly imagines it is as God's chosen city, divinely endorsed to be queen of nations and the splendor of humankind. So that actually puts a different shine on it, doesn't it? So because we think, God's, we're used to hearing, I've installed my king on Mount Zion, and it's this kind of, wow, that's great. But then think, hang about, how big were they? How many tanks did they have? It was, I don't know. It was a middle power, maybe, compared to the might of the Assyrians or the Babylonians that came later.
Yeah.
And so we might read that as Fiji will break Australia with a rod of iron. Okay, and we'll go, yeah, sure. Maybe that's how that would have gone down in the ancient Near East at that time. It wasn't known for being this, huge, mighty military power for most of its history. Although under Solomon, they did actually assemble a very powerful army, I think. But so I think that helps just to position that. So it's not about the army or the number of horses or the number of chariots. It's pointing to God and something else. All right. So let's look at a couple of verses here at the end.
Yep.
So serve the Lord with reverential awe and rejoice with trembling. Pay homage to the Son, or he will be angry, and you will perish in your rebellion. For his anger may ignite at any moment. All those who take refuge in him are happy, or all those who take refuge in him are blessed. Yeah, just having a look at that, what do you notice? Anything seemed a little bit, anything stand out? Anything seem a little bit unusual, maybe?
Unusual, did you say?
Yeah.
Like I said before, God's slow to anger and he's patient with us. That seems to say the opposite.
Because his anger may ignite at any moment.
Mm.
Yep.
There's an image of a contrast going on in one's internal being. So let's take this as one person writing, and what I'm seeing is that yes, there's worship and serving, but internally they are, so overwhelmed with awe and not quite fear to the point of inaction, but there's this tension within the same person, and it's almost like you take two different nations. One is rebellious against God, and then another nation who serves God, and you put those two nations inside one person.
Wow.
If you see what I mean.
Wow. Yeah. The thing I noticed there was, can you imagine? So what does rejoice with trembling look like? Right?
Mm-hmm.
What sort of things do we rejoice at? They party.
In general, yeah.
Rejoice with trembling? Wow. That's
Queensland winning the Origin.
What's that, Barry?
Queensland winning a state of origin.
It's like, or actually, no, Queensland 4 points ahead.
Football.
Queensland 4 points ahead, 2 minutes to go at the state of origin. You're rejoicing with trembling, they could still lose it.
Rejoice with trembling, it's really getting into it emotionally, and
okay.
That's what I'm just thinking. It's not just sort of singing, but it's really taking your whole body to just so rejoicing. I'm trying to.
I see.
Yeah.
So trembling, I was looking at trembling as being what you do if you're like terrified of something.
Yeah.
Don't be complacent, perhaps. Don't be complacent.
Don't be complacent. Okay.
Yeah. I think that's right. We're dealing with something that's life and death, and God is willing to be merciful to us, and we've got to understand that he can also, if we go against his will, he can snuff us out. So I guess that trembling, or another version might be rejoice fearing God, or something like understanding who he is, I suppose. He has been merciful to us. But understand that it could go the other way if we oppose him.
And what does that do? I mean, what would be the opposite of that? It could just be, you take the trembling, cross out trembling, and you've got there's like a happiness and a rejoicing, but this adds a whole kind of weight to it, doesn't it? It's part of the biblical picture of joy is that there is this weight. I think that's what we're getting at, isn't it? There's this
seriousness.
There's a seriousness, and I think that's where it wants to take us, right? Is to understand that seriousness, and we don't need to be fearful, but we need to be reverential. We don't need to be cowering in fear. That's not what it's trying to produce. But this idea of rejoicing with trembling, and that's worth having a bit of a think about. It's and then the last part, and we'll get back to Varysing in a moment. All those who will take refuge in him are blessed. And so I asked myself the question, if the king of the earth was your enemy, if we're just thinking of an earthly king now, if he was your enemy and he offered you refuge, would you want to take it?
I'd be suspicious.
You'd be suspicious. Yeah. So there's something here that even though this king that's being talked about, which we can see as being, you know, the way God is operating, is saying you can take refuge in me, and those that do take refuge in me will be blessed, will be happy. I'm not like the kings of the earth who just want to, you know, say, oh, come here, it'll be safe, it'll be good, and then turn on you and turn you into slaves or something. So, and to me, that's sort of pointing, this is, yeah, God is like a king, but very different to the way the kings of the earth operates. What do you guys think about that? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rejoice with trembling. Yeah. So bringing together these two ideas, but yet there's a trust that can grow. There's a trust and security. To use Rhonda's word, I think from earlier, that can grow because of the way God is. So we're kind of led into trying to have to figure that out there. Now, the part about the anger may igniting in the moment. So how do you make sense out of that, Barry?
That's why I'm asking you.
Oh, right. Well, that's the wrong thing to do. Okay. What are we in? We're in the Psalms, right? So I think what's happening there is that he's painting a picture of people would understand a king's anger igniting at any minute. In fact, we can probably think of Old Testament stories like that. You know, I'm thinking of
All.
Saul. Yes,
Yep.
yeah, Saul, absolutely.
Mm.
You know, throwing spears around. The Book of Esther, I think the king there got pretty angry pretty quick. Nebuchadnezzar got pretty angry pretty quick when it was a Daniel who didn't bow down.
That's right.
Yeah, so that's kind of what they do, right? That's how these things roll.
Mm.
So I think it's picking up on that image, and it's an image. So, and this is where we don't want to go to like doctrine statement from here. That's how I'd answer it, I think. So it's using an image there within the context of the psalm, and then we shouldn't press it for, oh, that means God is, you know, you got to walk on eggshells around him because you never know when he's going to sort of explode on you. So yeah, we don't want to. But that's the image. We would understand that's the way a normal king is, and I think it's trying to paint this contrast with what could be if you're in the right relationship, and that is you can actually take refuge and be very blessed and very, very happy. And that would have been like, no, kings don't do that. That's not how kings operate. It's how this king operates. So that's how I think that's working. Yeah.
Okay.
You can take refuge with this king. Any other thoughts before we move on?
I guess God's character is unchanging, and he says, I'm the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so, you know, he's trustworthy. So we can take refuge in him. He's not going to change his mind.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's exactly right. And that's the picture that we want to take most of all, I think. But there's this serious side, isn't there? Is that he expects to be no other gods beside him. So yeah, very good. Okay, now on to biblical connections. So this is a segment which we'll do every time. You can just see our little graphic in the background there about all of those connections through the Bible. So anybody didn't see it last week, along the bottom there, from the start to the finish, are all the books and chapters in the Bible. And there's a series of coloured lines, and they've drawn it like if there was a reference in Genesis that is mentioned in Revelation. There'd be an arc going back like that. Oh, you can't see me. There'd be an arc. There'd be an arc going from Revelation back to Genesis, and so forth. There's these thousands of lines with different colours, and you can see, and the height of the bars, these white bars here, are the number of references. So it's very hyperlinked, the Bible. Any biblical connections for us? So Acts 13:33 is named as coming from Psalm 2. It says, God has fulfilled this for us, their children, by raising up Jesus, as it is written in the second Psalm. Okay, so can't get any clearer reference than that. That's book and chapter. Okay.
Well, that's
you are my son. Today I have become your father. So that's a verse from Psalm 2, verse 3. And Hebrews 1:5 says, for to which of the angels did he ever say, you are my son, today I've become your father? Or again, I will be his father and he will be my son. So these so it's, the New Testament writers have picked up on the psalm because of this relationship between father and son. And Hebrews 5:5 says, in the same way, the Messiah did not exalt himself to become a high priest, but the one who said to him, you are my son, today I have become your father. And so there's three different places in the New Testament there that pick up straight out of Psalm 2, verse 3, and one of them names the psalm. So I think that's pretty amazing. And so little quote here about this. Paul delivers a sermon in the synagogue of Pisidian Antioch, emphasizing Jesus' resurrection as the fulfillment of God's promises to Israel. To substantiate his claim, Paul cites Psalm 2:7. You are my son, today I've begotten you. Today I've become your father. This quotation serves to affirm Jesus' divine sonship and his unique role in God's salvific plan. So they're really linking actually the resurrection as being the proof that that Jesus is God's son, as we've read about all these years in Psalm 2. That's sort of what they're saying. So
I've never heard of that word before. SALVIFIC. Know what it means.
You can guess what it means, can't you?
Yeah, you can, but I've never seen it.
Salvific.
Yeah.
It's not often used, is it?
No, not often.
An adjective from the word salvation. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so that's a pretty amazing connection today. And we see sometimes, we'll see a number of psalms like this where the New Testament writers have picked up on these ideas, things that have been written in those psalms as scripture, and then applied it to in the New Testament setting. Which, if you're an inspired New Testament writer, you're allowed to do that. Okay, so it's saying the resurrection is God publicly affirming that Jesus is God's son. That's very okay. All right. One or two more. Okay, I think we've done this. Yeah. So 2 Samuel 7:14. There's another passage that is quite pivotal, and it says, "I will be a father to him, and he will be a son to me. When he does wrong, I will discipline him with a human rod and with blows." So, obviously, talking at the time, because actually talking about Solomon. 2 Samuel, it's sort of the time of David and Solomon. And I think Samuel's talking to David about his descendant, who will be Solomon. I'll be a father to him, and he'll be a son. When he does wrong, which Solomon certainly did, I will discipline him with a human rod and with blows from others. So that's what 2 Samuel 7 talks about. But that idea there about the father and the son, again, is also related into all of this. So it's painting this picture that Jesus is the king, is the Messiah, which is another word for the anointed one that we read in the Psalm, equals God's son. So those ideas are being linked together. So that's what's coming out of that. So any thoughts on any of that, those linkages? What do you think about, you read something like that in the New Testament and there it is, quoted from the Old Testament like that?
The authenticity of it. I was just thinking, in the New Testament, the rabbis, the Jewish rabbis and priests, they would have expected Paul to quote scripture,
Yeah.
the Old Testament, but they wouldn't have expected it of Jesus. And when Jesus does quote, it's establishing his authenticity too, because they didn't accept that he was. No, I'm sorry. They didn't accept him as the Son of God.
No.
And when he's quoting the Old Testament, though, that must have made them sit up and take notice a bit.
Yeah, and I hated it.
Yeah.
I hated him doing that.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, Jesus used the scriptures a lot, and you know what? Jesus used the Psalms a lot. He probably would have read them every day. And he was very familiar with them. Yeah.
Someone's.
Yeah.
I'm just focusing on the word become. Today I have become your father, which is a little. I mean, you become a father when the child was born, but not some point later on in your life.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, so it kind of comes across to me as an invitation by the psalmist, or from an invitation from God to people or to nations to kind of adopt God as your father.
Okay. Looking up the word. So the word is yalad, which can also be translated as begotten. And it's a
New American says begotten.
Begotten, yeah. So
Today I have begotten thee.
Yeah, it's a choice it's a translation choice. Just bringing up on another screen here.
Is it something to do with Jesus coming as a man, and as a man, he was the Son of God. So is it sort of prophetic that when Jesus is born, in a way, God becomes his father because he's become a man? Is it something like that? I wonder.
I think what it's I think what the way that it's actually working in, like, so if we go back to this comment, this comment here, that it's almost like the moment that they're talking about. So we've been talking about the moment, right? Is it the moment of conception? Is it the moment of birth? Is the moment something later on in life? And it seems like in Acts 13, so if you read Acts 13:33, it says, God has fulfilled this for us, their children, by raising up Jesus, as it is written in the second Psalm, you are my son, today I've become your father. So it almost seems like it's saying at that point of the resurrection is the point that is proving. That's the point in time that, God's, Jesus' sonship of God is being revealed, if you like, or being proven or proclaimed to the world. They seem to be tying it to that particular point in time. And I'm just looking at the word now. So yeah, it can mean to bear or bring forth, like in childbirth, to be born, to beget, to primitive root, to bear young, causatively to beget, medically to act. It's certainly to do with a genetic birth, and to bring forth. Yeah, so you could translate it either way. So obviously some translations have chosen one. I mean, you know the phrase God's only begotten son as well. That's that same idea in there. So, yeah. All right. So we've kind of come quickly to the end here. So let's just spend a few moments thinking about, so we've been through this psalm that's got all this kind of war language. We've talked about these sort of ideas of rejoicing with trembling, the constraints yet the freedom, being willing, being confident to be able to take refuge. So just thinking through now, just personally, have you learned anything? And maybe it's just on the level of working your way into understanding a psalm. Maybe you've learned something about that process tonight, something that helped you think, oh yeah, that's going to help me figure out what these psalms are saying a bit more. Maybe you've learned something like that. Or has there been something that from our discussion tonight that's encouraged you? You're seeing something in a new light, something you feel, being reaffirmed, or something that you've just read. Are you left bothered by anything? Sometimes these things are tricky to understand. So, and how have you ended up understanding rejoicing with trembling? Does that make sense to you now? Yeah, so we can just open it up for, they're just prompters really for just some discussion and thoughts, just sharing how does this how's this landed for me?
Yeah, I think I'll have to go away and look into that, what that word Ray was talking about, the today I have become your father, and also, look into that rejoice with trembling a bit more.
Okay. Yeah. That's great. Sometimes we just even pay attention to a few words. There's a lot to be thought through just from a few words sometimes. Yeah. Thanks, James.
I took note of your question about, it said, is there a storyline? You read the Psalm, and I wouldn't have thought about that before. To ask myself, what's the storyline here?
Yeah.
So I think I'll definitely be paying more attention
Mm.
to other Psalms and other passages. Just what is the storyline here?
Yeah, I think the storyline is. Yeah, thanks, Ray. That works really well. I like the letters. I find, like Paul's letters. In fact, I don't think you can understand it if you can't figure out the storyline. He's got an argument. What is it? How does it work? But not all Psalms will have a storyline, I don't think. But yeah, I think it could be a great technique. Yeah, and it certainly helped me with this Psalm. So trying to get it under my fingers. So that's great. I'm glad you picked up on that. Mm.
Yes, that helped me too, Andrew. I'll be looking at the storyline, the Psalms as I read them. Yeah, I also found. Oh, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, you can even it's like you can just write it like I did, just write it out in different. Yeah.
That was good.
Mm.
I also liked the teaching on the parallelism.
Parallelisms.
Yep.
And so you can notice that now.
Yeah, identifying it here and there.
Yeah.
Yes, that's that.
The real feature of this kind of poetry. So, yeah, that's good. Thanks, Rhonda.
I guess with it as well, we get so used to just reading, or reading anything in the Bible, and then, but to example like that with the parallelisms, that we you can see things unravel a bit more, and it's sort of like reading between the lines, I suppose. There's and it does take us to a deeper understanding and a deeper learning as well, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it gets us thinking in pictures.
Pardon me.
You know what I mean? Because it's trying to paint a picture, and it gets us to think that way, and rather than bullet points sort of things. I mean, most of these discussions that we do, there's lots of bullet points, and that's the way we sort of end up being trained to think. That's sort of, I know how I think, but the lovely thing about the Psalm is to just think, let it imagine the picture in your mind. That's what it's designed to. And the parallelisms there help to fill in the color palette, if you like, of those pictures. Yeah. Thanks, Greg. Anybody else? All righty. Well, we can have an earlier night. So actually, this used to be the original stop time, right? And so actually next week something different's happening. Because I won't be here. I'm going to the Opera House. When we come back, the next one will be Psalm 3. So I meant to remind you, Craig, did you have any thoughts about next week?
Well, you said that Janice was going to suggest something, so I was waiting for her call. So.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Anyway, well, we've got 7 days, so
yeah.
Should
so
be.
One thought that has come up has been a week of no new material and a time to sort of unpack. So that's sort of an idea, or it could just there's lots of different possibilities. So next week I won't be doing a lesson. But be back in 2 weeks for that. But there will be a session next week.
Mhm.
Amen.
Well, thank you for